Well, hi Dave, thanks for being on. This is Dave McClow from Pastoral Solutions Institute, and welcome to this little video we're doing for our series Him and Her, an adult series on how to win at marriage. So thanks for being here, Dave.
Oh, thank you, Edmund. It's great to be here. My pleasure.
I figured we'd start real quick. If you could just give everyone a little background. We know you, my wife and I know you from marriage counseling. We've been doing marriage counseling on the phone for, I don't even know how long anymore, but it's been a long time. But if you could just give people a little background on you real quick.
Sure. I'm a pastoral counselor. I've been trained as that. I'm a convert, so I went to a Protestant seminary to get that training. I'm also a speaker and a writer, and I founded 3 or 4 text ministries for men. Mm-hmm. And I am married, and my wife and I do not have any children.
Nice. Well, thanks for being here. You've been huge in me and my wife's life. Our marriage, has just, we have so much to thank you for in our marriage. So I'm really excited to dive in a little bit into the series. And you were someone I thought of when we came up with this adult mini-series. And our first session's on communion. Our second session's on forgiveness, but our first session's on just communion. And as spouses, we're called to intimacy and communion, and one of the things that we've talked about in the past is how important real and authentic communion and intimacy is in our lives. We sometimes seek it in other places, and it can get a little twisted and warped. So if you don't mind talking a little bit about what communion is, especially in the context of marriage.
Sure. It goes back a ways into Genesis, where it's not good for man to be alone, and so that's the foundation of this. And I think it really does come out of the Trinity. There's an intimacy and a communion of persons in the Trinity that is reflected in the marriage or in any relationship, really. I did a talk at high school where I brought a ball in, and I held the ball up and I said, what is it? And they said, well, it's a ball, it's round, it's blue. And I said, yeah, you really can't tell me what it's for until you know what the purpose is, until you know how it's going to be used. And I said, today, this is going to be your teacher. And they raised eyebrows and chuckled. And then I proceeded to, and then I said, this is going to teach you about the deep mysteries of life, of marriage, of relationships, and the Trinity. So I thought I'd always go big. So then I took the ball, I threw it to a kid, he threw it back to me, I threw it to him, he threw it back to me, and I said, all right, so what did the ball teach you? And they got it. It's the giving and receiving, the extending and receiving. And this is the foundation of what happens in the Trinity, but it's also what needs to happen in marriages. You have to throw the ball to each other, catch the ball and throw it back. Now, there are ways not to do this, and we'll get into that next time. But if you're chucking the ball at each other, or it's a volleyball serve at 90 miles an hour to your face, you're not going to get the response you want, and you don't get the communion.
Yeah. Man, I love when you told us that. I love that image because there's so much there, and I think there's times too where even in a marriage you would think that it would be obvious that you would have a lot of communion and intimacy, but there are times where I feel like I just kind of hold on to the ball for weeks at a time. And I'm not willing to share with someone else, or to share with my spouse. Maybe you could talk a little bit too about the difference between. There was one time where you were saying that I was looking for communion in other areas, and that me and my wife needed to carve out time on a regular basis to have deep communion. And I thought, well, me and my wife, we communicate all the time. What else is there to do? We know each other, we talk back and forth. What is that deeper communion that spouses can have?
Yeah, well, so let me just back up just a little bit. So anytime the ball goes back and forth, if you say hello and somebody says hello back, then you've extended and received, and that's where new life comes.
Mm.
So if somebody says hello and they don't say hello back, that's when a death comes.
Mm.
And so when you do, and that's a very simple example, so it goes, on much deeper levels, but when you do that, when there's the extending and receiving, that is actually a reflection of the Trinity. Mm. And I think that extending and receiving, and so you don't need to carve out. We've been kind of following what the monastic way of spirituality, where you need to get 4 hours of prayer in a day. Well, not going to happen with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. Mm-hmm. So this makes every interaction a part of a reflection of the Trinity, where you can live out a spirituality in family life very easily. Mm. Now, so how do you make that happen? Well, I think you have to have liturgies. And liturgies are rituals, in my terms. Liturgies are rituals and routines that communicate love and create communion. So there's 40, 50 years worth of research out there that rituals and routines in the psychological literature that say this is really important for families and marital life. Mm-hmm. So they've come up with 4 different areas. So one is work. So you do chores. You do them together. So this isn't, here's a chore list. Kids, go off and do it on your own. This is do something daily with kids or spouse. We're talking about spouse, so we'll go with spouses. Yeah. Something daily, 5 minutes every day. In a work. So that's washing the dishes, that's cooking, that's, making a bed, I don't care what it is, you do it together, and it creates a little time together. And that's a liturgy. It's a ritual and routine that communicates love and creates communion. So then we've got play. So, this is, you need a 5-minute version, and then you need a weekend version, that you do it longer, so maybe an hour or more. Yeah. But play would be, maybe you play cards. Maybe you get out you might need a travel chess thing with the magnets if you've got kids, so you can stick it back up on the refrigerator. Mm-hmm. I've got actually one couple who reads. I think they've read The Lord of the Rings together like 3 or 4 times, and they read all kinds of books together. Cool. Yeah.
So it's something like like leisure, like recreation kind of thing. Yeah. Yes.
So then there's pray together, and this is Dr. Popchak has a book on it. I can't remember the title at the moment. It's like praying together. He jumps up and down saying that Catholic couples don't even pray together. Yeah. So get on that. Then there's talk. The talking together is getting the ball to go back and forth. Now you can do talk time. If you're playing together, if you're playing cards, that can be a talk time. Creating these rituals that help you to
like communicate deeper than just, hey, I'm leaving. Right. I'm on my way to work. Or like.
Right. And so when it's a liturgy, then you can count on the time being there. Mm-hmm. And this is really important. If you don't have these rituals, then it's fly by the seat of your pants, and it's hit or miss. So the talking together is it might be in the car on the way to church. I don't know. My wife loves it when we go travel because we're both in the car. I'm not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. She knows she has my ears. Yeah. But that's not ritualized as far as regular time. Mm-hmm.
So what would a couple do if, let's say, they set up a time? Let's say it was like tea time before. There's been a few times where Danielle and I have tried to get better at going to bed earlier. And so we would set up, we put the kids to bed, and then we both just make some, tea, and we just sit in the the kitchen just for 5 minutes and just talk. For some people, they might think, well, we talk all the time. Why do we need to do this? Could you talk a little bit about what we mean when we say, just communion, like deeper conversation, or conversation that's more life-giving, like you're talking about, that drives us towards communion with each other?
Yeah, I think so. There's always like the skills of this. There's setting up the time, and then you need the skills. And Matthew Kelly has a wonderful set of, what he's got 7 levels of intimacy, and they're very simple. And who knows if they're exactly right. They're just very helpful to kind of lay things out. So the first 3 are cliches. That's how are you? And there's questions you can ask here, and we can do a handout if you want.
Yeah.
So that's just the hellos. How are you? How's it going? How's the weather? Well, that's actually facts. That's non-personal facts. And then there's opinions. And if you don't do cliches well, then you don't move on to facts. And if you don't do facts well, you can't move on to opinions. And opinions is the first level where you're starting to share something of yourself.
Yeah.
So there are questions to ask at each of these levels. Then you can move on to the next one. Like 4 is hopes and dreams, 5 is feelings, 6 is fears, failures, and weaknesses, and then 7 is needs. And again, if you don't do the first ones well, and this is where I get calls, when the communication isn't happening on the first 3 levels, then they're having trouble. They're having trouble having the ball go back and forth, where the new life actually comes from the relationship.
So in that situation, just saying how you're doing, the ball doesn't go back and forth, because there's maybe just some healing that needs to happen, or then building up that skill in the first couple questions before getting a little deeper, and the other person feeling safe and feeling able to share in that way.
Yeah, or you get, how are you, and fine.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So what would you say for someone? Do you have any quick tips if a couple does feel like they sit down and it doesn't go super well like that, besides calling you?
Yeah, right. So we could do this handout with Matthew Kelly has some questions you can ask, but then, date night is another ritual that can happen, and you can do this in home. If you have kids and it's hard to get out, or you can do it out of the home. But a lot of times people don't know what to talk about when they do date night. So they're looking at each other saying, who did I marry, or I don't have anything in common with this person.
Yeah.
So John Gottman is a marriage researcher, and he's come up with, I would recommend anything by Gottman.
Yeah.
But he's come up with a love map exercise, and it's a very simple thing, and it's like going back to dating.
Yeah.
So, like the first question is, name your partner's 2 closest friends. And now the idea is not here, like, well, no, it's not Sally, it's Susie, and gosh, you don't know anything. That's not the idea. It's to exchange information and keep the ball going back and forth.
Yeah.
So, favorite musical group, hobbies, things like this. What's your spouse's hobbies and things?
Yeah.
And it's a very nice way, and the idea is not to rush through. There's, 60 questions or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is not to rush through it, and do this as a checkbox. It's to actually have a conversation. So, it's not, what's your favorite musical group? Well, it's Steely Dan. Okay, next. No, what do you like about Steely Dan?
Yeah.
And throw the ball back and forth several times there. And this just helps you get to know your spouse again.
Yeah. That reminds me of the book A Severe Mercy, I think it is, where they talk about, as a couple, they realized that they had to at least, they didn't have to love everything the other person loves. They just had to at least pursue an understanding of why the other person loved that thing so much, and take interest in it, so that they could share even their interests and hobbies.
Wow, I read that back in college. I didn't remember that coming out of it. That's great.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, cool.
So one more little thought that brought up with that is, so you have in the scripture, you have the two becoming one. So what you bring up here is, when couples are in trouble, the oneness means conformity. And so you have to be like me, you have to like everything I like. But then you don't have the two-ness. So you want to keep, it has to be okay for, each partner to be themselves. And then you come together, but you're still two. So you're one but two. So it's not an accent or a stress on the oneness as conformity. That's where problems come up.
Where it's like, you have to like the Grateful Dead because I like the Grateful Dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Dave. We're going to probably walk through the love map. We'll have the handouts, and in our next session we'll talk a little bit about forgiveness. So thanks for being here with us.
Okay. You're welcome.